Tanya Baxter, speaking about the flora of northern Sierra Nevada. And she spent
Me too.
off the beaten path, and it should be a very interesting discussion of a lot of things that many of us have never seen. Uh, Tanya is a botanist and ecologist. She has over a decade of experience in land management and has led landscape scale restoration projects for the National Park Service and with nonprofit partners. And she has a multi-year grant to eradicate the most invasive plants in 75,000 acres in Marin County. So she has a diverse set of tasks and skills, and this in the Northern Sierras, which she can tell you more about. So let me turn it over to you, Tanya. Thank you.
Great. Uh, Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure to get to see so many familiar CMPS members who we work on a couple of different things on committees in the county. So it's really nice to see all these folks that are enthusiasts for the flora and also doing a lot of great work on conservation and protection. So just to talk a little bit about this cool project, what got me intrigued was I had an opportunity back in 2017 to do some rare plant surveys in the Feather River Canyon. And as David mentioned, I worked in the National Park Service, and during that time, I got a chance to work in Yosemite National Park. So I got familiar with doing rare plant surveys and invasive plant surveys there. So my beginning began a long while ago. So there's been sort of this pull that draws me back continuously. And I think some of the advantages that we often don't realize is that we have this amazing state floristically. And in the Bay Area, our bloom season is very short. It dries out really quickly. And yet in the Sierra Nevada, it goes all the way into late August. And so there's a lot to explore if you're willing to go out there and turn over rocks and go the uncharted path. And so this is my just sort of a broad sweep of some of the flora I've seen over the last few years. I've been working on a project with Plumas National Forest. And I think I'm going to switch over to start sharing the screen so you guys can start seeing a little more of all this fun stuff. All right. So this is I just give you a little teaser while we're getting warmed up, but we are really familiar with some of our your hopefully there's not a lot. How do I turn off the audio? We'll just leave it like that. There's a lot of diversity, as I mentioned, but we also need to acknowledge some of the people that have been here long before we arrived and are still actually active in the area. I think that's what's really kind of exciting is that during my time getting to work in this vicinity is how quickly I got to know plants and people. And some of them are those that are very connected to the traditional uses of plants. And those are that either directly worked with the northern Madu or are descendants of the Madu. So I want to acknowledge that this is their land, this is their territory, and the exciting thing is that we're getting to see it very intact. So I want to further continue on. Let's go on the next section. So the flora of the Sierra Nevada also became a connection for me through San Francisco State, where I did my master's thesis. I had an opportunity to work with Bob Patterson, who hopefully is on this call today, and he studied mostly on the Boraginaceae. During that time, I got to get familiar with the San Francisco Field Campus, which is located in Calpine, and this area is infamously known as the Lost Sierra. And like a great term of endearment, a lot of people don't know about this area. So I do want to I'm going to make a few plugs for the field campus up there because we do offer courses that are open to the public. So if those that want to learn a little bit more about the flora, I do teach a week-long class and also a weekend workshop that is taught in the summer. And it goes over, I do use dissecting scopes, I do hikes, terminology, and fortunately I think there's some of my students on this call today, so we're going to have a little fun with that as well later on. But it's certainly a unique area, and it's one of the reasons why the field campus was drawn to this location, the Gold Lakes Basin in particular, because we have such a huge elevational range and you can access so much in a very short distance. So where am I talking about? So, the interesting thing is the Sierra Nevada is quite extensive, and we could, are most familiar with Yosemite. Maybe some of us go up to Lake Tahoe, but the area that I'm talking about is way up here in the north. Let's see if does my cursor show up? It's right up in this area right here. That's the Sierra Valley. You may all be familiar with Lake Tahoe. But the Gold Lakes Basin is the furthest most section that has had the last bit of glaciation during the Pleistocene. And so there's a wonderful couple that have ended up studying the geology of the Gold Lakes Basin. And one of them continued on with her PhD with this and has taught at the field campus. So I've gotten to glean a little bit over the years because it's very important in terms of what rare plants we have growing in certain areas. So it's sort of a teaser of what's to come. Interestingly as well, the Gold Lakes Basin is, as you can imagine, during the Pleistocene, there was a lot of snow, there was a lot of ice, there were a lot of moraines and melting that happened, and these sort of rock slurries that were created. And something that I've learned through my time getting to spend up there is that moraines aren't just like 20 feet tall, like a house, which I used to see the size of a house like they were in like Yosemite Valley, which I was first time experiencing. Some of these are the size of ridges and massive. So if you can kind of expand your mind a little about how extensive these snowfields were, they were so extensive, and they've dropped in much lower elevation than where we see snow today. And we're there for very long periods of time. So just to give you a sense, also, the Gold Lakes Basin is a basin. It creates a nice, beautiful bowl. And so for that reason, things stay a little bit cooler later in the season. And for that reason, there's a wonderful display of plants late into August, which is what makes it very attractive to go and visit. So up here, just quick reference here again, because I'm going to use maps. I'm a little bit of a cartographer and I need that sort of frame of reference. So I'm going to try to do my best in terms of using points of interest that we can be familiar with. Okay, so this slide you'll see again too. Where are we talking about? Can you believe it? Plumas National Forest is over 1 million acres. It's massive. Also, Mendocino National Forest is just as equally very large in extent. But in Plumas, it takes a lot for one forest service to manage all of this. If you can try to grasp the idea of it, it's not just 1 million acres going just on a flat map. You have to imagine also the very rugged terrain that's out there. So a lot of it, people haven't really seen or been able to access. And fortunately, a very large grant was written and was put forward to look at a community level study, both wildlife and plants. And several consulting firms it's been going on for about 3 years, since 2003. Then 2005 will be the final year. And this floristic inventory is requiring a massive effort. And we also have a very short period of time to cover a lot of ground. So as you can see on the map on the right, this gives you a sense of some of the units. So we're just working with 200,000 acres alone, which is a lot. Okay, so let's go back to the Gold Lakes Basin. I'm going to talk a little bit about geology. There's the beautiful scenery. This is some of our beautiful ceanothus down below that hopefully one of my students, I'm going to ask you guys to tell me what it is later when it pops back up. But the heights in this area are quite stunning. This is what we assume might be granite based. It's actually a lot of it's volcanic clastic. And these glaciers have created some really incredible shelving and these cracks and fissures from the freezing of the water, which causes the water to expand and also the rocks to expand, inevitably led to these really beautiful waterfalls. And this is a really popular hike out to the Fraser Falls. And then some of these dramatic drops that are on the North Fork of the Yuba River. Again, you can see more of the buttes. I just threw in a photo down here on the bottom right to give you a sense that these create some beautiful rock gardens for beautiful perennials and annual displays in the summertime. And if you ever get a chance, it's worth it. This is a hike up to the Sierra Buttes. There's a fire lookout up above. But I just want to bring your attention to this section right here. Believe it or not, I learned that this is a moraine. So you can see that the vegetation is really different than what is over here on this side. And a lot of this is because there's not very much topsoil. These rock moraines have boulders that are massive, so that it requires some deep roots to establish, and only certain species can grow in that sort of habitat. It's very dry inevitably, and they have to have access to water, so you have to have really solid roots. All right, so more of that unique geology I was talking a little bit about. So if we remember, this is Lake Tahoe, and our geographic frame of reference is sort of in this area, as well as this little box. But there's a lot going on in a very small range. We have the sedimentary and volcanic rocks in the teal, the ultramafic rocks, which are pretty exciting. This one I took some explorations on my own early on after finding out about this place and doing some work with Dean Taylor, whom some of you may know is a botanist, fabulous mentor to many, including myself. And I'll talk a little bit more about some discoveries in that area. And then there's also serpentine. So our serpentine on the coast is also reflective in this area as well. So we get a lot of beautiful, rare plants. And this is where a lot of my emphasis ends up being, is on these serpentine habitats. And there's just an example of just some of the ruggedness of the rock. That lower picture there is in the North Fork of the Feather River. So I'm going to go through some of the terrain that you can imagine. The Gold Lakes Basin, as I described, it stays cooler and a little bit more moist later in the season. And then we have over here in the North Fork, just to the north of it, very dry and very harsh. It's very noticeable. And it's also very steep. So this is, as you can see on the left here, this is a colleague. We're having to use ropes to get to some of these places. It's the only way. And as you can imagine, that's serpentine is not easy rock. It doesn't hold very tightly. So this isn't for the faint of heart. And then also, there's a beautiful river that runs through this section, and railroad you may be familiar with if you've ever driven up from Oroville towards Quincy. This is that section through Belden. Really beautiful. Lots of serpentine in that section. And then we're going to the Middle Fork. So this project, just towards the end in August, I got to explore the Middle Fork of the Feather River. This is also very rugged, very steep. Down there on that bottom left, there's Carex sheltonii, which is mixed in there, which is a rare plant. And also, this is my colleague down here. This is Brett Hall, who some of you may or may not know through California Native Plant Society, who was one of the board presidents for a while, and he's gotten back into the field. So it was really a pleasure to get to work with him again, because he was a mentor of mine way back in the day at UC Santa Cruz. And he does plant conservation, if you're familiar. Okay, so back to the project at hand. So this map on the right that shows the different areas, just to give you some geographic reference, Quincy is a little bit in the center of all this. Up here, this is the Bucks Lake Meadow area where a lot of the work was done. This area over here to the left, last year I did a lot. It's called the Claremont area, very rugged, very steep. And then also down to the south was some of that Middle Fork of the Feather River. Let's see here, down in this unit. As well as where we spent a lot of time. So just to give you a sense, these are pretty far apart. It may take me about 30-40 minutes to get to either end of these units, from the bottom going to the top, if you can imagine. So, and it's not just me. I'm working with a large team. So I'd start off, let's get some plants going. My project was to do an inventory as well as document rare plants and also invasive species, but a lot of our discoveries were populations of both federally and state listed and CNPS listed species. We were using some numerous different mapping softwares. I think I had about 3 or 4 of them going on at once to document these polygons with numerous amount of data that we were taking, lots of data that we're taking on them. But to get down to the flora, megaflora, I call them, that there's a little bit different than what you would normally see, notably with the Ipomopsis aggregata. has a sort of scarlet color that's orange that you don't not normally see in terms of the corolla color. The Calochortus lachinii, I don't find Calochortus in this level of density, really kind of striking. And the Erythronium purpurescens is a real favorite. This actually is on the way up to the Sierra Buttes, and it turns out to be in carpets. And it's right at the trailhead where the Sierra Valley Land Trust has a post, a sign up for the land that they've been protecting gradually over the years. And it's just a carpet of these beautiful fawn lilies. It's quite striking. And a lot of these flies, oddly enough, I kind of wonder if they're the pollinators, but they show up soon after the snow melt. So you have to get there early if you want to see those. Okay, so I know I have some students on my in my class on this call here. So I'm going to invite you on the chat to put some things in the chat. One of the things I do with my course is that there's so much to learn and there's so much terminology that I really encourage us to make observations. And so one of the ways we'll do that is by just naming some characteristics. So if you can name 3 characteristics, that's a really great start. And something that you notice about this flower. This is a classic of the Sierra Nevada, so a great one to start with. But anyway, I'll leave it to you guys. Bilateral symmetry, very nice, Dan. That's great. And also, you guys notice the hairs on this one. The corolla throat is narrow. These anthers have a unique way of opening, dehiscing along that margin, and those hairs are really important for capturing pollen. So really neat flower. Okay, so if you want to write in the chat, if you know what it is, go ahead and say the genus. I'll give you a second for those that want to play. Okay, so we got the pride of the mountain, maybe a plant family. All right, this is a Plantagenaceae. This one is, let's see here. Gotta go to the next. Maybe I can advance the slides. Let's see. There it is. Okay. So this is Penstemon newberrii. The penstemons are quite diverse in this area. It turns out there's like 271 taxa of penstemon in North America alone. So we have a lot of interesting relationships with pollinators. So that, you don't always see specialization in nature, but that's very common among the penstemons. This is another common penstemon we see. I really love this one. There's a rare penstemon, the Susanville penstemon, that's very similar as well. Has this sort of corolla throat with the guiders. Yeah, this Penstemon decutus. And then we also these are plants that I will often find on the rock outcrops. So one of the things I do cover in my class is just plant families. So I found this slide that I just felt like really captured the diversity of the Ranunculaceae within the Gold Lakes. Thalictrum fendleri, if you know, this is a dioecious plant. It has a female and male plants, separate individuals that for flowers. The common Aguilesia formosa, the Caltha leptocephala is a water-loving plant. And then we have numerous delphinium species. Another showstopper in this family is the Acontium columbiare. This one's neat for its pollinator relationship, large geographic range, and a lot of neat activity when you're sitting in a meadow. I think it's something that's really striking about going into this region is that the constant hum of pollinators that you will hear. There's just insects, and you might be dive bombed by hummingbirds. So it's very intact, and so you get more of an opportunity to observe these pollinator interactions, which is really quite enjoyable. So we're moving on to some wetland loving plants. The one on the left, I didn't say it out loud quite yet. I want you to try to guess what it is before I give it away. But the one on the left is a Lamiaceae. It's a mint family. And the one in the center is actually a traditional use plant. And because of the lack of ungulates, grazers, And a lot of these meadows, unfortunately, camas is not very abundant. It was also a really important food crop, also like a starchy staple for the Madu in the area. And it was really important in the sense that they would harvest and also keep track of these populations, just so that they didn't get them mixed up with poisonous species when they started to die back when they wanted to harvest them. So really important plant. So it's really always fills my heart to see it. And then the one on the right there, this one is another wetland loving plant. This is in the Rosaceae family. This is the Spirea splendens. Maybe some of you saw this um, on the advertisement. And there's another species also. We have Douglasii, which is a more elongated inflorescence and is a little bit more affiliated with little uplands. Okay, so this is a little, I'm getting just into my favorites. These are some of my particular ones I thought were kind of cool looking. This is a meadow down below that is very well known. It's called the Butterfly Valley. And you know, it's got such incredible diversity, and fortunately it was protected, and it's on you know, the Forest Service's radar to keep it well managed, and so much so that when the Dixie Fire happened, they were able to create just enough of a berm to prevent it from getting too heavily impacted. So it looks great, and the Narcisium, which is you know, just the stunning plant that will kind of take your breath away when you get a chance to see it, and in such density, has these really interesting hairy filaments, as you can see. All right, next we have the Darlingtonia californica. This one is always a favorite for folks. You know, what drives parasitic plants is that there's some sort of nutrient that's lacking in their soil. And so you know, there's been great effort to restore the hydrology of this particular meadow. There's a lot of mining history in the Gold Lakes Basin and all of Plumas County, including this location. And even there are quite a number of remnants still intact there. However, about 10, maybe 15 years ago, a large scale effort was to restore the hydrology. It's looking really great. So we get to see these Drosera rotundifolia as well. And I've sat there and just watched insects just fly in and get trapped by these. And it's kind of a sad place to watch, but pretty incredible meadow in terms of biodiversity. Okay, so I think I referenced Dean Taylor a little bit earlier. Dean had mentioned to me a handful of times about this particular Streptanthus polygloides that he knew of, and he really believed needed recognition as a separate subspecies. And there's not a lot of work being done in this particular polygloides complex currently right now that I'm aware of. There's a lot of other taxonomic work going on within Streptanthus, glandulosa being one of them. I think there's about 32 to 33 rare taxa in the state within the Streptanthus. And I believe if Amelia Ryan's on this call, she's familiar with it. She's working on a new taxa for down in Pinnacles National Monument. So pretty exciting complex to study. But interestingly enough, these are also within the Brassicas, the Brassicaceae family. There tends to be this sort of hyperaccumulation of metals. So they have an ability to tolerate in these growing conditions. And it's sort of a novelty in the 80s. It was looked at to as sort of a form of bioremediation. And I think, you know, I'm not sure how, oh, what happened? We just lost it. Let's get back. Okay, phew. And where'd we go? We'll get there. Just in the meat of the really exciting part. All right, I think it was this slide. Okay, there we go. So, all right, now we just gotta, um, So yeah, the phytoremediation effort has been going on in the 80s, trying to see if there was it was possible to use this as a method for making a bio ore, which I think, as I understand it, they would grow a lot of these plants in an area of these high metals and allow for the bioaccumulation to occur inside the plants, which is like a magnitude of about 100 more than what most plants can handle. And in that process, they could take the plants, put them in an incinerator, and consolidate it into a bio kind of char material. So it's concentrated, but it's not in the soil any longer. I know that there's some folks at UC Santa Cruz that have studied this with a different species. And, the thing is like what we're looking at here with Streptanthus polygoides is a very small annual. So I don't really anticipate that this would be a large scale project. However, just really interesting that this genus was studied for that in particular. Notably, you can see these white margins on this purpurians. So it's suspected that might be where Dean was going with the different subspecies differentiation, because of the more common yellow sepals, these sort of inflated wings that you see on right here. So just sort of neat stuff. So this location, oddly enough, is in near Downeyville, outside of Goodyear's Bar. And it took a little while for me to get up there to find this location, but the soil type is very striking. So once you see that, you kind of get a sense of where to start looking. And it's just in Plumas County, is my understanding. So it's not a rare species yet, though. Okay, other really cool finds. Oh, I had such a blast in this area of the Bucks Lakes Meadows, and coming across these pedicularis. They're the racemosa. They may not just call it, like, right now taxonomically it's known as racemosa. The variety alba is recognized in other states too. The range, oddly enough, is that Racemosa var alba, if you could see the image on the map on the right there with just maybe 4 or 5 populations, is all that we have in California. However, it exists in other states like Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. So interesting. But here we have it right here in little Plumas County, and in a really neat area with Leucothe davisi, and just a very isolated section near the Bucks Meadow area. And so on the pink morph is a little bit more of the commonly seen one there. As you can see, the distribution is much greater. Okay, so Monordellas. Interestingly, there's a lot of stuff going on with Monordella odoratissima, which many of us know on the coast. That whole complex is under great study, and there's some publications that are proposing just breaking that species into a number of different taxa. So I'm not going to go into that for the sake of this talk. It might take me too long, but these 2 particular species are endemic to the Plumas National Forest, and made it a little bit more of a mind tease because it commonly occurs with another monardella that looks a lot like it too. And you can see the geographic distribution, a little bit of overlap, but again, these are both CMPS 1B2 rare species, and they are both serpentine-loving plants. So very cool. So what do they look like? Very hard to tease apart. We're talking about this plant covered with really matted intertwined hairs, particularly on the stems. I just really like these long hairs that are coming off these sepals, really striking in this picture. This is Seven's Eye. Seven's Eye again, a little bit more of that dense hairiness on the stems. There's a number of other characteristics to go by, but I'm trying to focus it down for the sake of this talk, because I could go on a little bit about it. But Follettii is the other species to get it confused with. These stalked glands, I find them very challenging given the certain light that you're working in with your hand lens in the field, to always distinguish these glands. So I went a little bit more by the hairs, that these longer matted hairs. And then also, once you started to get to the Follettii and the Seven's Eye, which is more commonly seen coexisting in the North Fork of the Feather River, whereas most of this current work was not in that vicinity. So I'd have to run down and find some reference populations and get them next to each other and figure the difference out, because it's fairly difficult. And especially later in the season as things start to dry out. But so Folletii has no hairs on the leaves or the lower stem. And that was a little harder, I think, come August, when just you need fresh material to distinguish that. So, but fascinating. They're all serpentine endemics, and again, they have this very narrow geographic range. So very cool.
Tanya, can you put it into slideshow mode?
Oh, I was sorry about that. Okay.
So better. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's like super slut. Oh no, we're going too fast. I was really enjoying it that mode. I could see where I was going.
Whatever works for you.
How's that? It's a little better. You don't want to look at my screen. Okay.
Oh, that's good.
All right. So there's the middle fork. We get to review everything a little bit, like what you forgot. The erythronium. Looking at that Penstemon newberii, really pride of the mountains. And those that are just coming on board can get a chance to see what they missed out on. Okay. So there we are. Monardella. Okay, so it's all about hairs, really. We just talked about Monardella. The Monardellas having hairs. The Bochara Christansii has also a lot of neat stellate-shaped hairs. It's not just this particular species. It's a break in the key for the Bocharas, but certainly a real tease. And the width on the fruit on this one is really important as well. It's a rock-loving serpentine endemic. And so this is a nice little example of it. I have it zoomed in. If you can imagine, these are very small. They grow about 4 inches for their leaves at best, as tall, and maybe those flowering stalks are about 18 inches. So really nice plant. But I think those stellate hairs are really striking for me. I think that's a neat representation. So, okay, Penstemon personatus. I said that there were some surprising finds on this particular survey. And so, mind you, I am also building off some experience that has been done by some folks over at Lassen who've been studying Penstemon personatus. And I think I mentioned that I had been collaborating with Brett Hall. He is doing a large seed conservation effort, and this particular species was on his list. And so he had already put some time into collecting some of these seeds for seed banking purposes, for the purpose that they are. This is a really good example of a plant that is highly endemic, only found in a small area of the Plumas National Forest. At least that was what it was thought. And it goes up to about and into Lassen and on some private land. So there is some concern because this particular species is rhizomatous and it has a closed throat corolla. So it was sort of presumed that there might not be a lot of pollinators prior to some studies. Unfortunately, these folks found that there were about 16 different species of pollinators that are visiting Penstemon personatus. And I bring this plant up because it's so neat to have a closed throat penstemon that is having has 2 adaptations in terms of how it survives and spreads in this area. It's highly rhizomatous, and also it's very sensitive to lack of light. So in shaded areas, there was concern that this population might be sort of the canary in the coal mine for the lack of fuel treatments or fires coming in the area that create that open canopy gap that is that's been documented to be required for this plant to survive. So the study of one of two demonstrated that it actually is thriving in some of these with fuel treatments and responds positively. Both the plant does well to the sunlight, and then on top of that, it attracts a lot of these osmia and the megacylids and the bombus. Those are two major pollinators generally that come to Penstemon personatus. And the great thing is that we found over 1 million of them. So despite this area looking like a lot of slash and fuel buildup and maybe not as much canopy, openings as you would hope for a species like this, it's doing really well. And so much so that it took us by surprise and we had to redirect our efforts in terms of mapping it because it was so extensive and get some extra help because it just showed up everywhere. So it's sort of an exciting success story going on right now. But I think that there's a real effort to continue to study the species as well. Penstemons are just a really neat, fascinating group, and inside the corollas, it's bearded like all the other penstemons, beard's tongues, which is what their common name is. So neat flower. And you can see these sort of clasping leaves. This is a classic characteristic of it where there's no petiole, or barely, if one, maybe 2 millimeters at best. And it started to get this little yellow discoloration, started to senesce a little bit when we were out surveying. So it made it a little easier actually to identify patches of them really quickly from a distance. Okay, so I said there was some exciting things that happened while I was up there. Oddly enough, the first day on a new unit to the south, if you're familiar with Calpine, it's about a little over an hour, I'd say about an hour north of Truckee. And there was a section that I needed to do some surveys. And it was the first time that I had ever been in a situation where lightning had ignited a fire. So I have worked in fire, believe it or not. I have kept my red card for 12 years when I was working for the National Park Service and got to work on prescribed fires, but it still does not fully prepare you for when you have one happen right behind you. So this is a little quick story to tell you a little bit about, but I did bring maps because I like maps. That particular day we were surveying, we were doing these sort of shuttles. We don't do them very often, but when the conditions are right, we would park a car at the top and then find a way to hike down and have another vehicle at the bottom and do this sort of repeated shuttle drops. And fortunately, that allowed us to get to know the area a little bit better. But you can see in the map on the far left, this is the highway. And so started down here in the red point. And I believe I came down this way. Both of these were drops. And then in the afternoon, I was working with Brett Hall, chatting on the radio, both of us. Really important thing that lessons learned is always make sure you have great communications and backup alternatives. Cell phones are not always going to be your go-to. So, the clouds came in. We thought, oh, great, we're going to get some rain. It's kind of hot today. And sure enough, we hear the crack of thunder. And I'm hearing folks on the, using some cuss words saying, oh, wow, that was really close. This middle picture is after I'm starting to run down the hill. I realize that this fire is happening. We originally thought lightning, maybe we need to go get to a vehicle and hide in our vehicles because as you know, that's the best place in a lightning storm, but it certainly changed conditions very quickly to a fire. And I don't think I've ever seen a fire plume build so big and so quickly ever before in my life. And I had a moment when I was running away to take that picture as I was heading out. So on the right here, you can see the mill fire. And this is a great software that documents the spread of fire. I highly recommend you get it. It's called Watch Duty. And it pinpointed the ignition location pretty accurately. It was probably about 500 to 600 feet from where I and myself and my coworker were working. So anyways, we got out safe. We were able to document that the fire, how close it got to some vehicles there. You can see it on the right. There were 2 vehicles left up there. Only one of them made it out. One of them burned. And this is the aftermath. I think this really does show how important it is to do these sort of fuels work projects, because this severity is dramatic. I think this is 2 months after I went back. That car that I think I mentioned is completely gone. It had been towed at this point, but that's the location. And it's sort of chilling to think about it. But, you know, when I walked through this area, the sound of termites was so loud. It was like a chorus, and it just sort of, to me, it was like, oh, there's renewal. There's a process here. However, I didn't see a lot of new growth quite yet. Of course, it's only been 2 months, but a lot of topsoil loss. I think that's something that that a lot of people are thinking about now with these catastrophic fires, is how much topsoil changes, and also what does that mean for the seed bank. So anyways, let's go on to fun stuff. The other fun discoveries I found were some mountain lions. These were kind of neat characters that were out one day, and I got to see the mama. They didn't want to get off the road. We stayed in our vehicle, but really, really incredible, rugged area. There were signs of bears everywhere. We didn't have any encounters, of course, but fortunately, so just a beautiful location. I got through this a little bit faster than I thought. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about some questions and go over a little bit about the field campus. I put this slide back up if you had some questions about how it's run or the area. But our project has one more year of surveys, and it's the bulk of it was done in 2024. It was a massive effort. I think there were about 25 botanists on this project, and so, you know, there's an incredible amount of inventory that's been documented. We had some bryophytes that were also in the study, and those were taken back and looked at in much further examination under dissecting scopes by some specialists. So yeah. So I want to thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, I'm really open to talk and open up the floor for conversation.
If you have questions, I'd suggest you put them electronically. That is, raise your hand in the React. It's now in React tab at the bottom of your screen if you're on the computer.
Oh yeah, so I have one from Clint. He said, "Ari, am I going to return to the mill fire to see if they're fire followers?" Probably. You know, actually, I saw some Ceanothus prostratus, which is a low-growing Ceanothus, starting to come back up on that 2-month visit. I didn't get a chance to get a photograph. It was very small, but that has a really strong root system. And you know, notably, a long time ago, I worked with USGS and on a research project looking at how fire impacts the landscape, and we had thermocouplers that we put underneath in the soil. And from that study, just within, like, I don't know, 10 centimeters, the soil does not heat up as much as one would think. So it doesn't do as much damage as I thought, unless it's burning there for, like, you know, weeks on end. Certainly it's going to be a different story, but I think that was something that struck me, is that we assume that the soil gets very hot, and it is actually an incredible buffer to these really hot fires. So I have a lot of hope for those stump sprouters, particularly our manzanitas. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Is anybody thinking about a field guide for this area?
Oh, good question. Well, you know, for the class, I use Flora the Sierra Nevada, and that's Norman F. Whedon. It's an older version, and then also a blend of the Jepson. Whedon is actually pretty handy in a lot of regards, just to get for a beginner basic, get you going. But it would be a large undertaking. If you guys know of anybody like wants to fund that, I'd be happy to collaborate with a number of different botanists. I think it would be a large team that would want to be involved in that.
Yeah. Janet Heckman has her hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Janet. You can unmute.
Yeah, there's a trail that goes down from Long Lake and ends up down by the Gray Eagle Lodge. And I've found that trail to just be incredibly lush. Do you ever work on that trail?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. That's one of my favorite. Those pictures that you saw of the trail to Long Lake that I had a little back. That's a rock garden back in there, and it's just stunning. And I take students over there because it's accessible and it's on our way to Long Lake. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Yeah, sounds like you know the area well.
June Kuna has a question about fuel treatment. She says, "Thank you for the plugging for the RX burning fuels treatment. Is there interest or implications for management from your study?"
Yeah, I think when we were looking at the Penstemon personatus, we thought that there was going to be a need for more canopy openings. That was, like I mentioned, the sort of the canary and the canola. It's kind of like the species that is more sensitive to the lack of tending and stewardship to the land. So interestingly enough, we you know the fuel treatments, they responded positively. And yet we also still discovered large populations of them within sections that were full of shade and had fire suppression and fuel suppression for a long time. So it's a mix of both. So that particular species responds very positively when there's a fuel treatment that goes on, which is what was the study done with folks at Lassen. But, in other areas, it's continuing on. And, I didn't really go too much into the fire history of the area, but it's had repeated large catastrophic fires within the last few years, the Dixie Fire being one of them. It's also within the area of the town of Quincy, which is a lumber town. That's their, their economy, essentially. There's one large mill that is, that employs a lot of the folks there. So, it's really hard to tackle, and manage a 1 million-acre forest, I think. And, we've gotten a chance to talk to the Forest Service botanists, foresters and the timber industry and all of it. It's really a dialogue that's continuing to go on among all of them. But then you have a catastrophic fire come through and it's very challenging. You have to cut trees down and get them off the ground too for safety for a lot of the times. So it becomes challenging, to plan accordingly. And so it's great that a study like this is underway so that when things like this, like a major event happens, at least where you're going to put the dozer line or wherever you're going to put heavy equipment, you can anticipate where your rare special stratus species are. And also just know what habitat is really important. I think I was struck by the high number of endemism in the Plumas National Forest. There's just incredible amount of species that are not necessarily considered listed rare, but you just don't find them. They're there and they're abundant. So it's really an interesting balance. And now that we've seen some of these major fires go through, it's like we have to go back and see really how things are going to respond. And so that's going to be interesting. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of the Gold Lakes Basin, I know a lot of people here spend time there. It's the Gold Lakes Basin vicinity where I mentioned how it's in a basin. That area has dramatically very different way of being managed because it's more of a recreation area versus what's up north. If you go to like that White Hawk area where the fire was, or further north to Quincy and Bucks Lake Meadows, that the contrast is really striking. For one thing, also the Gold Lakes Basin has a lot more volcanic features. So there's a lot of natural fuel breaks in between among the forest. So it's a little bit easier to manage, if you will, from their standpoint, because there's nothing going to grow on a large acre slab of granite. So. Or excuse me, volcanics.
Allison has a question in the chat. How area is recovering from the Dixie Fire?
Oh, what was the question? How do you think the area is? Yeah, so I think it's pretty hard to see in some areas actually. It's sort of a moonscape in some locations. I don't have access to all of it, but you know, it's rugged, it's steep, and that I think, as I mentioned, that topsoil, that you know, the first rain, it just brings it all down the hillside. And even 2 months after going back to that location that I mentioned, there was like a brief little rainstorm. I noticed a lot of that puddling and that mud slurry moving down. So I think that's sort of the future to look at is, you know, when we're concerned about what are the long-term effects? You know, I'm always impressed at how quickly and how well forests respond. But yeah, you never know really. So
Carolyn Longstreth has her hand up.
yeah, hi, Carolyn. I think you have to go off mute, Carolyn. Oh, maybe she's not.
We'll
We'll
come
come back to her. Okay.
back. There's another question. Clint asks, have you come across any astragalus or
Oh,
in your surveys?
yes, I have come across stragglers. We have a handful of them that are rare on our target list. And I was not in the vicinity of the ones that were rare. Yeah, I didn't come across a lot. I do see them in, especially as I go further east and sort of as you get closer to Reno and the Sierra Valley area, that Great Basin habitat. But I did not come across anywhere stragglers on these last 2 years. So
And Eriogonum,
go ahead.
Eriogonums. They also
Oh yes, we got Eriogonums. Yes, Eriogonums are great. Eriogonum sprigulanum is one of my favorites, and I see it abundantly growing in these sort of rock gardens. There's Eriogonum undulatum all over. The other neat thing about this vicinity is that, you know, it's close to the Sierra Valley, and Sierra Valley is the largest high elevation valley in the Sierra Nevada. So it gets a lot of Great Basin flora mixed with this high elevation ponderosa forest plants. And we get iviceas and, you know, there's a neat ecotone that occurs. And so it's a fun place to explore, especially for Eriogonums and Pritoridias. We have a lot of Pritoridias, the Yampas that you guys are familiar with.
Well, do you have a question, Carolyn Longstreth?
Yes. Hi, Tanya. You mentioned the dozer line, and you know, during firefighting activities, they put those in. Do you think your data about rare plants is going to get transmitted to the firefighters in the area so they can avoid the serpentine and the rare plant populations that you've documented?
Yes, that's a great question. So there's a group in Quincy that is called they're like the Quincy Library Group. They're like the working group. And they are a number of ecologists and professionals that have come together to talk about these sort of issues and have made a lot of plans. One of them came out of it was the SPLATS method. You may have heard about this.
Yeah,
SPLATS are this sort of aggregated you know, fuel treatments in large areas. They have to be large, extensive tracts of forests that can be treated to sort of break up monotypic or like a contiguous stand of fuels. Like if there's an, you know, even age stand of trees that goes on for a mile, it's sort of to break that up. And so I think a lot of these discussions are going on because these fires are being fought with these wider and wider dozer lines, as you mentioned, and that's a concern. And so, you know, the effort right now is what I understand, having spoke with a Forest Service botanist, is that he works hand in hand with the foresters and the folks that are making these calls at the Forest Service. And so, you know, it was kind of a pinnacle of his career to be able to write this sort of grant, to be able to get this sort of study going, so they could have this documentation and it could be there for the next 10 years for them for planning. So they can make these sort of decisions going forward that, when the operations show up and the teams, the smoke jumpers arrive, that they're communicating these resource sensitive locations immediately.
Mhm.
And that's the nice thing, is a lot of this is progressing quickly. And I can't say that for all forests. I work down as far further south in central Sierra as well. And I see a real contrast in terms of how different national forests are managed. And it's very challenging, one person to do so much. So I really have to hand it to them for writing this really incredible project, getting it onto the ground. It's really impressive. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
Ray Lynn put in a chat something maybe of wider interest, that the Feather River Land Trust just had the grand opening of their nature center in Sierra Valley. It says it's gorgeous, so it's something to put on your list of things to do if you get up in the area.
yes, I highly recommend it. Yes, I've been watching that progress. And if somebody are familiar with the Sierra Valley, there's a large wetland where there's a lot of migratory birds that come through, and you get to see sandhill cranes and ibises and all sorts of. I'm not an ornithologist, but I certainly do pick up bird loving experience when I go up. I have to stop, and so the Feather River Land Trust has been doing incredible work in the valley, and I'm impressed with the number of folks that are involved in conservation. Like I mentioned, it was very easy for me to meet people quickly there that are doing good work, because it's a small community and everybody knows each other, and they've got ranchers on their side. They really do care about the land. So yeah, I would check out that education center. There's so many people that are been raving about it. It's beautiful too. It's just very well designed. Yeah.
Would like to ask a question. The floor is open. Well, looks like we have no more. Tanya, I want to really thank you for your presentation. Your presentation, from my personal point of view, is probably right at the top of the most new plants that I've never seen before.
I need to put more then. I still got time.
I'm sure. And I want to thank you not only for your presentation, but for the pioneering work you're doing in doing these surveys, which is really important.
Yeah. And come and check out the Sierra Nevada Field Campus. I've been really enjoying this community that's also up there. I think I really want to emphasize how folks that are interested in birding and fish, or, we want to learn about reptiles, or we even have songwriting, and, it's all nature related, and it's like a summer camp for adults, and you're just constantly learning. There's something for everyone. And there's lectures going on in the evenings by scientists, and there's folks that have been returning on a regular basis. So there's a shared body of knowledge that continues to build off of each other. Ornithologists the birders love it. I think there's like 3 or 4 birding classes alone. I teach the plant class, but and I've been kind of trying to focus a little bit this year. We do a trees and shrubs class, and that's like a great warm up if you're overwhelmed by the flora up there and you can't take 5 days to do my full class. And you can get a lot from it. We cover a lot of ground, and you get to experience the community of the field campus and the Gold Lakes Basin. The Gold Lakes Basin is a great area to recreate. There's camping nearby. So if you don't want to stay at the field campus, you can camp, whichever you like. But yeah, it's just a remarkable area, and I think it humbles me continually. And also just getting the sense of how old things have been around for. When I get to talk about glaciation and how long plants have been evolving, I think that appreciation just continues to grow for me each time I go up there, because you are kind of going back in time. You are going back in a time when these plants have been existing. Angiosperms have been around for about 250 million years. It's just sort of incredible, and it's intact. The pollinators are just humming in these meadows, and Yeah, so it's just something to behold and experience. I really encourage you to develop appreciation for it. So, come on up.
Before we leave, for any latecomers who are chapter members, I want to give you a chance to vote for the board of directors for 2025. I put up one poll at the beginning, and if you did not vote at that poll, I'd encourage you to vote in this one, which I'm going to launch right here. You may have to scroll down a little to get it. And I'll leave it up for a minute or two. Christine Jacob, do you have any word about the January program?
No, couple of feelers out. If anyone has any suggestions, by the way, for speakers for our chapter, I'm always open to more ideas. So you can contact me at 650-608-1274 or by email, and I can put that in the chat.
Okay. I want to close this until everybody has a chance to vote, and the numbers keep going up slowly. So I think we may be there. So I want to thank you for attending, and hopefully we will have a program in January. We've been very good about doing these 12 months out of the year, and we hope
We used to only have 7 or 8, and so it's a lot of work to find speakers for 12.
I'm going to take down the poll and wish you good night, and hope to see you next month.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.